I admit I was pretty young when I first started, in about 1945. Some of the information I'll talk about actually, and this is me when I was a little younger. But I didn't come to church when I was 7 months old, which this picture is. And I'll go the wrong way. Here we go. We originally started our services at the Grove Street School, and it was at the southwest corner of Grove Street and Lake Street here in Haddonfield. And the Reverend Patterson, rector of Trinity Church in Moorestown, was the priest who conducted the services. In 1842, the wardens and vestrymen were appointed and a resolution adopted to purchase the site to build a church in town. It would become the third oldest worship place in town, preceded only by the Friends meeting and the Baptist, which was 1814, and then we came along 1842. On April the 11th, 1842, the cornerstone was laid and a wooden frame building was built. On Thursday, September 29th, St. Michael the Archangel's Day, it was consecrated. There also was a burial ground in the back, but all the records of the interments have disappeared, and so have the interments. But there is a stone little monument outside, you'll see when you walk out that way, which would be one of the corner posts where they would have the cemetery blocked off with a pipe that would go from one to another and so forth. And we still have one of those corner things outside.
They're very heavy. We had to put it back in after they did the construction.
Correct. In 1866, the Reverend Gustavus Murray was elected rector and served for over 29 years. You can't miss his large portrait in the flower sacristy when you walk through this way after church. His is on the left. It's a big oil painting. His greatest legacy was this construction of the present stone church that took the place of the old wooden church. And we still use this one after 126 years. The Reverend Murray died in 1896. The rectory, which was next door, was a wooden Victorian built close to the sidewalk, as you can see. And it's now where the beautiful lawn is in front of the present rectory that went up in 1960. But do notice the wall of stone wall right along there. In 1966, that was taken down. That's part of another story. And this driveway here would go right through into this area back here, and then all around here, and would go out this side. And that's another story I'll mention later. Oh, and back in 1873, by the way, church pew rentals were $18 a year, or $9 for half of a pew. So April 12th, 1892, the first service was held in the new stone church. The Stations of the Cross were given in memory of the late Philip Allberger, a former organist and choir director by the Men and Boys Choir. In early 1950s, the chancel looked like this, and Al has put lines for me in the picture. But if you notice the very last one on the left, that's yours truly. I started singing in the boys' choir, and my favorite seat, I used to sit on this side, the first seat. And then in the men and boys' choir, I was back there. And although it's hard to see Father Bollinger's picture, or Father Al as he was called, he came to us August the 1st, 1966, and lived in the present rectory that was built in 1960. It's surprising to learn that the former priest before Father Al did not have a secretary. And
we were on the committee in those days. It was so easy to get a new priest, in my opinion. The bishop sent us names of 10 people that he would approve to be our rector. The vestry split up. We had 3 on a team. We'd go out to a different one that was on the list, come back and discuss it. And after 3 weeks, it was unanimous. Father Bowling was the man. Others were either too old, too young. We just thought they were inexperienced or whatever. So he asked, once we were down at the beach, he lives in Cape May, we were on the beach with him just socially, and he asked my wife if he knew anybody who could be a secretary, or he asked, who's your secretary? And Rachel said, we don't have a secretary, Father. Kel does everything. He said, well, I want a secretary. Do you know anybody? And Rachel said, well, I've been a secretary. He said, okay, you're hired. So for 10 years, she was possibly the first secretary of the church. Who knows? I don't have any records of before that time. And in this picture, you'll see some of the former secretaries. It doesn't look right. Okay, Mary Hamlin right on the left, and then Susan Taylor, who's living out in Marlton, and then my wife Rachel. So they were the first. And presently, of course, we had Sue Getz, who retired recently, and now Jean Mugler. In 1970, this beautiful wooden crucifix was made in Oberammergau, Germany. Sorry about that. Erase that, Chris, will you please? And it hangs over the side altar that was built by a parishioner named Pete Leindecker, in memory of his wife. In 1976, the new Vermont slate church roof was installed by Fred Kuhn, who just died a few months ago. He said it would last 200 years, so I'll have to leave it up to you young folks to see whether he's right or not. And Mr. and Mrs. Ryland Hanger had been fixers here in church for years, and in 76, the new large rose window, which was the one out front towards the street, was replaced in memory of these folks here. And Mr. Hanger's father was an Episcopal priest. And one of their sons, David Samuel Hanger, just died about a month ago. He was living down near the shore. He sang for years in the choir.
What happened with the first rose window?
Oh, I forgot to mention. I was going to say that to the end, but I'll tell you now.
I was going to save it to the end.
No, I'm going to tell you now. They took it down piece by piece and threw all the glass out on the front yard and then carried it away. I happened to see them do this, and I collected a number of pieces, which I have donated to the church. Plus, I have a piece that will be the last picture that I show you, about this long, this high. It was intact when they threw it to the ground. But the leading wasn't good, so I took all the old leading out and re-leaded it myself. And now I find it's sort of falling apart too. So that was 1976.
So you've got to get the lead out.
Ah, yes. And then this was the new window replacing the old one. And in there, St. Michael is somewhere, I guess maybe in the center. Anyway, it has a great history, as you can learn in one of the history books we have. Let's see.
Who designed that window?
Say it again.
Somebody designed that window? Somebody in the
who
church?
designed it, I'm sorry. In 1978.
We could go check if it's been signed.
Somewhere there will be mentioned, won't it? We needed a new organ. The original organ was on the gospel side, where the sacristy is. So when the sacristy is rebuilt, there was no room for the pipes and so forth. So this committee got together to pick a new organ, which is the one that's now on the epistle side, sometimes facing that way, sometimes facing this way. And Ed Dale had been a longtime parishioner, singing in the choir. And then my Uncle Ray, my dad's only brother, he had been a church organist at the First Baptist Church in Camden for about 40 years. My mother had been church organist in a number of churches. And then Tom Patton, our organist and choir director, who was here for 69 years. It's just unbelievable. That guy was like the Energizer Bunny.
When did you get the new organ?
78. And this window is up over the altar. But down in the lower right-hand corner, there's a piece that looks a little different than the other colors, as you see. To my knowledge, it was broken when one of Father Al's boys hit a golf ball, and it went errantly and hit the window. And so I had gotten some glass, you know. I told you I had glass, so we found a piece that could fit in there. So next time you look up the altar, look for that. Now the priest's sacristy was new in 1987. This was also built by Pete Leindecker, and a public address system and a recording system was installed.
In what year?
87.
So that's the age of our sound equipment.
Yes, and this was the sound headquarters there, where you could record the sermons, and for a while they were recording them and taking them to shut-ins, I mean, not shutouts. And I don't think that's been done for years. In 1989, the memorial gardens out back here were dedicated, and that's Father McAfoose. He was one of our assistant priests here, and Mellet Belshaw was the bishop at the time. And this just used to be a stony area, it was a parking lot. Mr. Patton would pick me up on Grove Street coming in from Westmont to come to choir rehearsals on Thursday night, and we'd come in the front entrance through the portico here, and we would park right back here about where the memorial garden is now, because that was just a parking lot. The memorial cross was given in memory of a fellow named John Bottomley. I did not know the gentleman. In 1994, this shows the entrance of where the new ramp is now, which wasn't there, obviously. It would soon become the handicap ramp, and notice back here, these steps are no longer here. The ground was built up, and when the new pipes were put in for the drainage system and the new ramp, things were raised up, so no longer are the steps to get in there, which is a nice idea.
I have to point out, you see that there's a little white spot from the foreground of the grass. The sewer cleanout is still there.
Okay. In the background is Dennis Dobie, who spent many hours here regarding the building of this parish house. And the other fellow is Stan Sikorsky, who died last year. A new heating system. Whoops, I'm ahead of myself. Sorry about that. So the new ramp. Now, these stones along here were the wall we saw in one of the previous pictures. In about 1967 or so, the wall was taken down. I don't know why we took it down, but we did. And they were taken down to Sicklerville to a fellow named Jack Jennings' farm. Just put them down there. And he used a few of them as the steps into his house, by the way. But most of them were left from the wall. And when we wanted to get the ramp, someone said, well, it'd be nice to have stones to match the church. And I said, I know where they are. So I called Jack and I said, could we get some stones back? He said, sure. So the fellows went down in trucks and brought the stones back. So they are original to the wall that was out front. I didn't have a picture of 1994, the new heating system for the church and the parish was installed. Okay, the ramp was dedicated in 1995 at Eastertide in memory of a fellow named Peter Rockefeller. And he went to Bancroft School and he was in a wheelchair. And it was really tough to get him up the steps, so his parents said they would pay for a ramp, and it started out 25,000, I think it was. And I think Margaret Westerfield down in Barrington or Haddon Heights was the architect. And they said they would cover the 25,000. Then it went to 30, 35, 40, 45, and I think the final price was about 50,000, and they covered it all, which was very nice. Our interim in 1996 was this fella, and I hope we don't get him back this time. Many contentious hours we spent with him and the bishop. Many times the bishop came down here to see us. Bishop Doss met with the vestry, some of the vestry. Yes, we were not all in agreement, but most of us figured he should go. And we were sitting in Betty Phillips' house one day with the bishop, and I know Jim Pern was there, and of course Betty, and he knew of all the problems we had with this man, because Betty and I used to go up to, she was my junior warden when I was senior warden that year, and we'd go up and see the bishop. And so one time he came down and he just asked me the question, do you want me to remove him? I didn't want that on my back. I said, no, I would like you to make that decision. You know all the facts. And he kept him. So he was here for 18 months and drove a lot of people crazy. But I think that's what the interim's job is. You'll find when someone comes, he is trying to get rid of the memories of the past and look forward to the new person coming. And the person who leaves, like Father Close, will not be allowed to come to the church for, I believe it's 2 years now. They made that rule back in 1996. You have to stay away from your previous church for 2 years, because that would make it tough for the new person. Person would come back, people could flock to him and all that stuff. So we'll see what happens. I hope it doesn't take 18 months again to get a new priest. Back in 1996, lightning struck our bell tower, cross, right up here.
Killed all the bats, right?
Pardon me?
Killed all the bats.
If there were any, they're dead. And so it chipped off, and we wondered, why didn't the computer system work? It was burnt up. Our phone system was burnt up, all because lightning hit there, because inside there were some rebarbs, and the metal, it took a hit. Cost a lot of money to replace everything, and then a piece was put back where it had been chopped off. And we found these pieces on the top of the bell tower on the floor. It happened to be the night before the anniversary of when Father Bollinger came here 30 years previously. Very interesting, I thought. Father Al, you're telling us something. In September of '96, Mr. Patton retired after 69 years. And I presented him with a plaque, and then there was a tree planted outside. And he was a dear old man. In the choir pew, as you go up to communion on the right side, the very first book rack part has holes. Well, they all have holes in them like that. And singing in the boys' choir, we had to watch by not putting our fingers through, because we would be docked money. The choir boys got a stipend every month based on the number of practices you attend and Sunday and your deportment and your behavior. We may make $2, $3, $4 a month. We got paid to sing. It was so I was a professional singer as a teenager. And my parents did not have a car until I went to college, and Mr. Patton was the one who would pick me up on Grove Street and bring me to practices. I don't know how I got here on Sunday. Excuse me. Let's see. Back in 1960, the best thing about singing in the adult choir was I met my future bride, and after 11 months we were married. But Father Kell, the minister, would marry us because it was the first Saturday in Lent, and we don't marry anybody in Lent. So I wanted to get married on my 25th birthday like my dad did and like his brother had. So we went over to Lutheran Church, and Pastor Paul's married us over there. So then, because we got married, Father Kell excommunicated us. And we were not allowed to sing in the choir. We were not allowed to teach Sunday school, which we were doing. And perhaps we were the only people Grace Church ever has had excommunicated. That was in February. Then at Christmas time, my father-in-law, who was senior warden at that time, talked to the bishop, and the bishop said Father Kell had no right to do that. And he got in touch with Father Kell, and we got reinstated and all that. So I was here when Father Kell left too. He was the one the vestry asked, please retire, go somewhere. And then his wife...
If you get excommunicated, do you have to pay your pledge?
No. So then he retired, yes, in July, or he was gone 1st of August when Father Al came. In other words, he was up here till one day, and the next day we had new priests. So unlike the new system where you have an interim for a year or a year and a half. And before he left, though, his dear wife died. And some of us on the vestry got blamed for her death. Because it was such a shock to ask him to retire. She had other problems, which I won't mention. I don't think it was our fault. I'm counting on it not being our fault. Father Kell, he was here for 17 years, from 1949 to 1966.
And then Paul took over the day after?
He took over the day after, August 1st, 1966. The next picture shows the remnants of the old 1842 church. This had been the sacristy, but in yet later years, for years and years, it was the nursery was back in here. And then these windows would be the windows which would be right along here on both sides. And then that was torn down when the new parish house was being built in 1999, and then was consecrated in 2000, I believe. Gladys Johnson was a member of the church who nobody knew, I think. I've never met anybody to know her except Father Bollinger and Father McAfoose. Father McAfoose had been he was a doctor, and he was her doctor, and she wanted to leave something to the church. About $1.8 million, which was very nice. So in the will it said she wanted that to be done. Her husband fought it. They went to court, and the judge ruled in favor of the church, saying he had enough money. He had, I think, a $900,000 IRA, and he had a $300,000 house down on, I forget what street, Washington. Yeah, Washington. So we got the money. But only the two priests knew of her. I mean, Rachel was here 10 years. She never ran into her. So finally, that window that you see right over there in the parlor is in memory of our benefactress, Gladys Johnson, who is buried in Harley Cemetery in Camden. And then her husband was so upset he moved to North Carolina. This man was an interesting man. Henry Carlton Beck was a parishioner here. He was in the class of 1920 along with my father-in-law and mother-in-law at Haddonfield High School, which was at the corner of Lincoln and Center where the middle school is now. And it was just called Haddonfield High School, HHS. Our new school down the road is Haddonfield Memorial High School, built around 1926, 1927, in memory of those who fought in World War I. That's why it's called Memorial High School. But they were in a class of Haddonfield High School. He was a school teacher. He wrote for the Courier Post. He did historical items for the Newark Star Ledger, and then he became a priest. And he had a charge up in Pennington, New Jersey, up above Trenton. Very nice gentleman. And let's see, I wanted to mention a couple of other things. Grace Church is where the Haddonfield Post 38 American Legion was founded, in this building. Haddonfield Symphony Orchestra began playing upstairs in 1952, and I was a senior in high school, and I came and I played, and Tom Patton Jr.'s son, some of you know Tom, who had a bad fall recently, he played in that orchestra too. And it's now called the Symphony in C in Camden, but it was originally Haddonfield Symphony that started right upstairs here. And I then went off to college, and I missed the first couple of years of the concerts, but I was there at the very start. The Boy Scout Club in Haddonfield.
Nothing happened in Haddonfield while you were away?
What was the last thing? What?
Nothing happened in Haddonfield while you were away in college?
No, everything stood
Time
still.
stopped?
Time stopped for me, right. And then the first Boy Scout troop in Haddonfield was formed here. And at the time, it was only the 33rd Boy Scout in the county of Camden. Now, let's see. Father Beck has a school named for him, after him on Cropwell Road in Cherry Hill. It's a middle school, so it's the Beck School, if you ever hear about that, named for a former Grace Church parishioner. These two people were so much involved in the life of the church. Henry and Louise Worthington were fantastic, wonderful people. Henry is sort of the precursor of Al Schmidt. He did everything around here, all sorts of maintenance and so forth. We had a sexton, but he couldn't do anything unless these people told him what to do. He was incapable of doing things on his own normally. So they were just pillars of the church. And that room right where I'm pointing is called the Worthington Room, named after these two folks. She was our church secretary, our church treasurer for 25 years. She sang in the choir for many years, and she encouraged me to take Rachel out. So she was one of the ones responsible for me finding a wife. But I said, no, she's older than I am. She has 2 kids. She was almost divorced too. But I did, and that went on for 56 years. So they deserve a room named for them, I feel. Father Bollinger died May 23rd, just 4 months after he retired. He was afraid to retire. He would say to me, I don't know what I'm going to do. And I say, Father Al, you like golf? You could golf every day. And he was up in the Poconos where they had a house. He had gone up in the middle of the week, and he was going to be a fill-in minister at a church on Sunday. And I forget whether it was a Thursday or a Friday. I got a call at 5:30 in the morning from his widow, Cecil. They were living on Grove Street at the time, and I couldn't get what she was saying until I heard Father Al died. So Rachel and I went over to her house, and it was just tragic. He was up there, and she was here, and awful. So he did not get the entire retirement. He wasn't very afraid, but he let his body go. Maybe Bobby remembers. He had 5 stents put in his heart when he had his heart problem. And he was doing well for years. And then he sort of laxed, forgot walking around, and just wasn't even able to walk 1 block. And so he did not have a good retirement, obviously. Now, a very moving experience, number 1 probably outside of my own family, was when he died. We had a very large service here, and they brought a closed-circuit TV into this parish house because the church was so filled, and a lot of people were in here watching the service going on in the church. And I was working for Hall Murphy for 8 years after retiring as a teacher, and I was given the honor to drive the hearse with him in it. So we started out front. They closed the highway off all the way from here down to the Baptist cemetery. And I don't know how many people walked, but there were a lot of people, priests in their cassocks and cottons and so forth. We walked down, they walked down, and when we got to Haddon and Kings Highway, right where the fire department is, my instructions were to stop the vehicle. I stopped the hearse, and they blew the fire siren in memory of Father Al. He was a fireman, and he also was their chaplain. So that was their little honor. Then we went to the Baptist cemetery. They had a full military funeral service for him with the guns and all that. He had been a lieutenant colonel in the Air Force, a chaplain in the Air Force. And they did a regular service, and then the bishop had the service, and then everybody left, and after they left, I drove him in the Harley Cemetery where he was cremated. I wouldn't be surprised there are people who still think he was buried down there because they were there at his service, but he was not. And then I remember picking up the ashes and bringing them here. And, I don't know whether I or Michael dug the hole to put the ashes in, and so that's where the late rector, Father Al, is located. The windows and the door are in memory of Father Al. I could not get a good picture showing the beauty of the windows, however. And the last window, or the last thing, is the window that I have in my apartment. I used to have it over the transom, or in the transom over my front door on Lincoln Avenue, where I live. But then I took it with me, and someday I'll just probably donate it back to the church. Some of the pieces, I just the other day took it out to show somebody, and a couple pieces started falling out. So my lead job wasn't that good, but I did put it back together intact, and it's about yay long and that high. And that had just been thrown down on the ground, and it stayed intact when they were throwing all the glass away. And I think that was that, but I'd like to mention a few other things. I've donated to the church some anniversary notices going back to 1942. Being a hoarder, I do tend to save things. I gave back a sign that was on the last part of the original church. When it was back here, before they tore that down, it said something about original 1842 church. I gave the church back some of the organ pipes from the 1895 church. I gave back some of the altar part from the 1842, and I think Al knows where they are. They saved a bunch of hunks. It was plaster of Paris type altar they had. And then a clapboard, I gave some from the 1842 church, and Al found that one's out there hanging on the wall. I gave them an acolyte stool. They were throwing those out. There are two of them, and the one is by the baptismal font. As you look at the baptismal font on the right, there is a little chair that we acolytes used to have to sit on, just a little hard bench. And I gave them some nails from the 1842 church also. So I'd like to just beg your pardon for another 5 minutes. There are some memorials in church that you know about, some of you probably don't. We have an Armed Forces Memorial plaque. It lists those who were in the service, and one of my cousins, Bob Brown, is listed there. He was in the Second World War. Unfortunately, you can't see it because there is a banner in front of it, which I think is a disgrace to hang in front of a memorial plaque for servicemen. Maybe someday that banner will be moved somewhere else. I would love to see that. The baptismal font that we have was given in memory of a man named William Snowden, who lived it was given about 1862. To the right of the baptismal font is a little table in memorial up against the wall, in memorial of one of Bob Twitchell's grandsons who died at a very early age, and that was about 1999 or somewhere in there. The chancel rail, where we kneel down for communion, was a thank offering for Herbert Shiver's wife's recovery from an illness. Now the chancel rail gates, those gates that they open and close for communion, were in memory of a Dr. Shivers. And you know about the time capsule, which was dug up last year. We put that in. It's supposed to be a 50-year, and people here couldn't wait, so they dug it. It was put in 1995, and it's now dug up. The flower sacristy that you walk through was renovated in 1994, and there's a plaque on the wall with the names of the donors who contributed to that. It was designed by my next door neighbor, Gordon Nielsen, whose brother was Johann Nielsen, the builder. They did like Charleston Woods and the Haddonfield Mews, and he designed what now is the flower sacristy. And you'll see some old doors. They saved the doors from an old sort of press closet. And when the ladies had to do the flowers, they'd open up one of the doors, pull down a table, and work on that. And it was fixed up so they had their own little room to work in the flowers with a sink and all that. That was a big improvement. That was 1994, I think I said. Yeah. The high altar is in memory of Elizabeth Murray, the widow of Father Murray. And now it's partially covered up by that new small standing altar. Well, you can imagine what I think about that, to cover up this beautiful hand-carved altar. The lectern was given by a young men's Bible class. I don't have the year. We have memorials outside, and this parish house was renovated around 2001. Another memorial that you can't see is a prayer desk that was given in memory of my father in 1970. And for years it was used at confirmation. 2 people could kneel on it, and the bishop would bless the one, and then when that person got up, another person would come as the bishop would be blessing the other person, and it made a very nice flow of movement of the confirmation. But it's upstairs in the storage room, unfortunately. I miss it. The processional cross was given in memory of Jane Jones in 1992. They were very faithful members. The rood screen, that's that thing that separates the nave from the chancel. That was given in 1906 in memory of a lady named Isabella Shivers. There are 4 stained glass windows. The newest windows that we have are in the flower sacristy, as we have called it in the past. Margaret Vaughn sang in the choir, lovely lady. And next one is Tom Patton and his wife, organist, and she often would sit up there and turn pages. She was a nice lady. Next was in memory of Paul Orlando, Jesse's son, who was a choir member who died quite early, very early. And the next one was in memory of my folks. My dad sang in the choir, and he was president of the men's club, which they had back in the 40s and 50s. And my mother, who for years at that Lenten service that goes on Tuesdays, for 20-some years she played the organ for that. Even though Tom Patton was the organist, he let her play the organ on Tuesday. But boy, that was his baby. He didn't like anybody play on his organ. That's his organ. Oh my God. But she did that, and she had taught Sunday school here for about 55 years. So those are the newest windows that we have. And then the tract racks are in memory, I guess they're in the back of the church with all some tracts, news articles and the pamphlets, given in memory of a Jeff Williams. I don't recall the name at all. And then upstairs is the piano that my mother just loved, a Steinway piano. And when she died, I thought, what to do? Well, I got an appraisal. It was $14,000. So I gave it to the church, and yes, I took it off as a donation. Yes, I know what you're thinking. I really did. But as long as it lives on, my mother would be happy. And I just have to tell you this last story. A number of years ago, I think it was 2001, they were closing up the music class, school upstairs. And one lady had the job to go around, make sure everybody was out before she left. And she came upon a woman dressed in black with a lot of rouge and heavy lipstick, an older woman, and said, "I'm closing up now. Are you waiting for somebody?" And this lady said, that the woman sitting didn't say anything. So she said, "Well, look, I'll leave the door open, so when you leave, you just leave. It won't set off any alarm or anything." And she left. The next day, this lady went into the office and asked, "Who was that lady upstairs last night?" She just sat there, she didn't talk. She was dressed in black, she had a lot of rouge, dark lipstick, and they said, "Shouldn't have been anybody up there." And they got out a directory, a church directory, and they said, "Would you go through the directory and see who it was that you saw last night?" She went through the directory, stopped at my mother's picture and said, "That's who was upstairs last night." And they said, "That's interesting, she died a year ago."
Wow.
Woo! People in the office were, that's one of those strange things. So another ghost story from Haddonfield, that the man who tells ghost stories and has written a book about ghosts in Haddonfield, he knows about it. I sent it to him, but I don't think he's used that story. So thank you for listening, and if you have any questions, make them easy.
I have a question. You said the flower room was rebuilt in 92.
1994, I believe, is what the plaque says.
So by then, was there something there before?
Well, they had 3 closets. They all had doors on them. Doors had to be open to get in there. And one of them looked like one of these ironing boards that comes out of the wall or something, but this was a table came out of the wall, and that's what they would do their flower arrangement on. I forget what the other
You
two
still have
were.
the sink and the water and everything?
It was a little one, but they improved it.
Yeah, okay, so you already did have water and stuff on
Yeah.
that side of the tree.
And then after a while, they found out the pipes were getting clogged because the ladies, when they would work with the oasis, that green stuff that falls apart easily, that would go down, and they had a dickens of a time for a while getting those pipes cleaned out because of the oasis. I hope they don't have those problems anymore.
No, that we used to see.
When I was a kid, this kitchen was back at the back, which also was used as a nursery. And this room over here was the choir room. And the parlor here was the library. So things, they have changed.
As we're sitting in this room, from that front of this room to, not quite where the other brown spot is, you see that the floor has a slight belly, but that's the end of the original church.
It was a small little wooden church.
And it went from that wall to this wall. And we only know that because when I cut a hole in the other side to install the ice maker, we found siding.
That's the siding you see right out there. Yeah.
So if anybody asks you, that's the size of the church, and then the stone parlor, the library, the parlor was added in 1942.
What did you say about the parlor?
The parlor,
That was here.
is that the 1842 church as well?
Oh, I don't think so.
No, I think it was when this building was built around the 1840 church, I think they added that.
I don't remember. Yes, this building was built, the church was moved back about 1918. No, they had to move it back before. But in 1918, they made a parish house out of the old church. So, have a great day.
Thank you.
Write your own history that you know of. Someday somebody,
Father Pat asked me to put out some of the history books.
a couple of the old history books are over yonder,
Oh, boy.
and they are,
Feel free to take them.
I thought he said they were supposed to purchase them. Has that changed?
Yeah, right, that's what I said. Maybe you can tell me about this one.
There was another memorial that Father Pat, or the interim, got rid of. There was a little children's altar that was right back here before this was built. And on Sunday mornings, Father McAfoos would conduct a service, and my mother would play the piano for the kids. And this little altar was made by my father-in-law for a son of his who died in 1930 at age 4 with water on the brain. So you have found this that used to be on that, but that no longer is there. And I hate to see these old memorials go. And the alms basin, the cross, candlesticks and vases in memory of Joseph Ross Crandall Jr. The Crandalls were very much part of the church, and they had a youngster die. They then went up to the Pocono area. They're great skiers. They were nice members too for years. So I've seen a lot. There's no man who's been going to church here longer than I. It makes me feel really old. I should be like 100 instead of 80. I don't understand that. But that's the way it is. I got confirmed in 1950, and no man can claim being confirmed earlier than that in this church.
What Jim Perrin?
Who?
Jim Perrin, how far does he go back?
He came in 52. 2 years after I was confirmed. But I had started in 45, and he was living in California, I believe, and his parents moved here. And so his date is 1952.
Wow.
And then Dick Hammond is 1954. And unfortunately, they'll be moving to Florida soon, unfortunately for us, because he did so much with the food bank for years. Never got any recognition, and he got upset. That's why he doesn't come to church anymore. 20 years he was a reader at the 8 o'clock service, and there were words between him and someone else, and he just couldn't take it anymore. No recognition of him serving 20 years as a reader. It would have been nice to have something in the newsletter or in the bulletin or announced, so forth. So he doesn't come to church anymore.
One more question. Parking lot. Did the church use that parking lot back here? Has that always been a use for parking lot?
To my knowledge, it stopped at the end of Rector's parking lot. But this used to be a through street here too, by the way.
There was parking out here.
And then there were homes all along where the back roads. There were homes here, and they were torn down in the parking lot. Oh, there was one person that has been in church longer than I. 2 people actually. Dottie Gruber, who is ill and is at the shore, and then Louise lives out in Marlton somewhere. She was confirmed in 1943 along with my wife, but Dottie Gruber is 1942, so she's the longest attending member. Not quite active anymore. Jesse came in the 50s. And some of these old timers, probably people thought old George Freeze might have been the oldest. No, he just came recently and was at the same place. So that's the story. Any other good questions that I can answer, please? Well, thanks again for coming. I appreciate you coming. Have a great day.